the real music industry, like not the BS that I've been hearing at certain points of time. So a lot of people want to look at the old music industry like, oh, it was so much better. It was so good. It was so fun. It was terrible. I grew up in it when I was a little kid and I saw it. I saw firsthand what was going on, the corruption. Let me give you a little example of how it works. So you had so many people that were having their music stolen. It is not even funny, okay? Because you have people who are working regular jobs, traditional 9-to-5s, who are musical geniuses, right? But they didn't have the funds, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the connections. And so when they would get the opportunity to give their little tape, that's all they had back then was like these, a little cassette tape, that's it. And you would hand these off to people, and that was your way. That was your ticket, that's all you had. That's all you had. That was your passport. And what would happen is that was oftentimes a passport into destruction, because what would happen is they would go to conventions, they would go to artist conferences, they would go to meetings, parties. Oh, I have the opportunity to meet this person, that person. And what they would do is they'd hand off these little tapes, never see or hear from the person again. Next thing you know, they'd be hearing their shit on the radio. And I witnessed it. I was there firsthand with someone who I watched how hard they had worked on a song and how they set up their demo, and they were all excited because they were going to hand it out to all these people. And I was actually there in the moment when they heard their song on the radio, which ended up winning a Grammy, by the way. And that's not the only story I have like that. And the horror. And they screamed, they let out a visceral scream to the top of their, it was whew! Oh my gosh. And there was nothing they could do. There was no Instagram. There was no TikTok. There was no YouTube. There was no nothing. Like, that's that. They went and got an attorney and stuff like that, but they didn't know how to, back then, it wasn't as easy to copyright as it is now. Now, all you have to do is go to US, Library of Congress, us.gov. You can copyright all your songs in 10 minutes. It's a little pricey. It's like $6 to $8 a song, depending on what type of, if you do a bundle, it comes out to about $8 a song. But anyways, you can copyright all of your songs right there. Individual songs, it's like $60, I think, a song. You can upload it to the internet. Back then, it wasn't like that. Back then, you had to issue in standard notations and all kinds of, it was a whole different process, and it took a lot longer to copyright a song. And it was expensive. And so that's when, back in those days, a lot of people would have either a music attorney do it for them or a music attorney friend or something like that. If they didn't have that, if they're just a regular struggling artist, they didn't have $1,000 to get their songs copywritten first. They barely had enough to get a little demo on a cassette tape. You know what I mean? And so they used to work so hard back then. Like they used to, I'll show you. Back in those days, you would record with something like this, right? And you would put your little cassette tape in. You'd have your keyboards all set up, your mic set up, and you had to get really good to where you could get it down in like one take and try to get it as clean as possible. And you would record it on something like this. So back then, this is pretty much all you had. This is a great machine. I just bought this a few years back. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. Back then, this was all you had. You would record on something like this and do your little keyboard parts, sing. You had to pretty much get it perfect. You put it on one of those little cassettes that I just showed you, and then that was your passport. Listen to this song, please hear it. You'd have to hope that they would put it on their cassette deck at home and listen to it, and they would listen to it, and they would take that shit from people, and they wouldn't give them any credit. They'd be like, oh, thank you, whoop. Actually, one of the most dangerous things you could do back in the day was sending your stuff off to A&Rs. People would spend all this money to get duplicates of the tapes or CDs, send them off to A&Rs, and sometimes you never knew what could happen. And so a lot of times attorneys started advising people not to even do that. Back then, you had that type of corruption where you had people doing that all of the time, and it was the norm. It was the norm. And we're talking about the 90s and before then, that was the norm. That was what they did. Okay, number 2. You had constantly, right? This was not something that happened like a few times. This was 96% of the time, I believe. It was something like 96% of the time. If they saw you were really good, you were talented, like you were performing out live a lot, especially. So, you know, you're getting recognized for doing your songs and stuff like that. You're building up a little bit of a fan base. They would sign you to a major label and you'd be, oh my gosh, and wow, woo. And you had a 96% chance of getting shelved by certain labels. 96% chance. You had a 4% chance of having your album come out. And they would do it all the time. I actually watched when, during this era where they had all these like metal bands, like rap metal type stuff, there were a lot of really good bands in the area that I'm from. And they were all excited because they were getting deals left and right. They were getting deals like crazy. Album would never come out. They were working at like the Walgreens and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, they found out later they just signed us so they could shelf us. So they weren't allowed to perform the music in some cases. They weren't allowed to have the recordings that they made. And that was a wrap. And it turned out they were going through and signing up all those bands because they saw them as perceived competition for the bands that were on the label. So they wanted to make sure that they had all those songs recorded so they could hold on to them and they didn't come out. And that's when you get into another form of corruption. You know, let's say you're in that 96%, you record all this music, you want it to come out. Well, what do? That's when, you know, you have special deals being made behind the scenes. You know what I mean? That's when you go talk to that executive producer and, you know, or that vice president, that VP, that A&R, you know, you go start rubbing elbows, and that's when you get into those situations that we're going to leave it right there. Number 3. Here's one of the worst parts. So you have things like, you know, my tape machine right there. That one right there, which to most people might look like, oh yeah, why are you using that? Da, 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 da. So this tape machine right here, I've got a few of them, but this one right here in particular was $10,000 back in the day. Now, once digital came out, I heard you can get them for like $800. And they're obviously much less than $10,000 today. But back then, you were looking at $10,000 to get one of those. Now, that's back then. That's in back then money. So you can imagine that came out in the late 80s. $10,000, that would be like $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 now. Not everybody had the money to get one of those decks. And with those, you can get something, you can record something that sounds a little bit, or actually a lot more professional and cleaner than something like the device I just showed you. It could sound a little bit more radio ready. And actually, in fact, there were a few songs that did get on the radio back in those days from using one of those machines. It did happen. I will go through that another time, but Inya, she used my machine that's down there. And actually, I own the original tape machine that was used to record Whoop, There It Is, Whoop, There It Is. So I know for a fact that it was that tape machine because he used it to record that song. And I wish I didn't just do that. Okay, so there's a cool story about that. That's a whole nother story. I'll probably put that on my music channel. But so you could get those machines, these type of machines, about 10 grand back in those times, right? So you're looking at, in today's money, probably like $30,000. So not a lot of people could do that, right? So if you were lucky, and it did happen, you could get a friend or something like that who happened to get one, or in some cases bands, if they were dedicated, would put together their money. And now they all, you know, had access to recording these. And this was like your real ticket into being able to do something. You know, if you had a band that was that dedicated, you guys could get one of those machines. You could get like an entry level professional recording, right? This was like bare minimal entry, but it got you, you know, where you need to go, where you need to get. But unless you had that, which most people didn't, you just had no way to record for the most part. Even the little cassette player is so sad. I watched an artist back when I was a little kid, you know, have to rent one of those. And they spent like their whole paycheck to be able to rent one of the little 4-track cassettes that I just showed you. Spent like their whole paycheck to be able to rent one for like a week so they could record their songs. That was it. That's all they had. Outside of that, it's just ideas that you just have to just keep practicing them and memorizing them, and, you know, maybe put it on like one of those little budget mini cassette players, and that's it. That was it. You couldn't record. You couldn't record. So if you wanted to record back then, you had to go through some people. And a lot of times those people wanted you to pleasure them or wanted you to give them something that, even if you did that, there was no guarantee they were going to give you anything. You had to know the right people. You had to get with the right people. And that was it. So imagine you're an innocent young girl or young guy with a really good voice, you know, really good piano player. All you want to do is write soul songs, beautiful music, rock, whatever. And the only way that they're going to actually let you record is you got to go through one of us. We got to corrupt you. We got to make you, we got to get you to do this. We got to get you to do that. You need to basically get pimped out. How evil is that? How twisted is that? And then you have number 4 scenario where, especially back in the 90s, they were doing things called like stealing people's voices. So you kind of see an AI version of that now where they can kind of sometimes do weird stuff with AI. Well, what they would do back in the 90s is they would get a lady who could sing really good, powerful voice. But let's say she's heavy set. She's maybe not the most attractive. She's pretty, but she's not like, you know, a Barbie doll or whatnot. And they would get her a record. They would tell her, we're going to make you big. And, you know, this is going to be great. She's all excited. She's hearing the song, the music. She loves it. She thinks this is going to be her big song that she's coming out with. The next thing you know, she's at home watching TV and she hears the song, but they put somebody else's face to it. Her voice. Yeah, they used to do stuff like that too. So many people have been traumatized. So now you have an era where people can put out their own music, distribute their own music, record their own music, promote directly to their audience. But yet you have some from the legacy era, from the pre-era, I call them the legacy artists, who are like, oh no, I don't like it how it is now. That's not fair. Da-da-da-da-da. It's like, look, this is what, so no, every time I go to like look at that era nostalgically, I just remember all of those stories. I just remember all of the pain. And a lot of these people, like most of them, aren't even doing music anymore. Or they have all kinds of songs, little tapes and things like that. They won't put it out. They're like traumatized. Like they're, how do I put it? They're in, it did a number on them. You know what I mean? Because that was a rough era. That was a rough era to be in. I'm sorry. Like that's the real. And I'm sure there are other artists that can attest to that. That was a rough era. Anyways, and yeah, it worked out great for some people, but a lot of times, as you guys are starting to see, with some of the weird stories that are coming out, there was more to it. A lot of darkness, a lot of corruption, a lot of, All right, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. If you like this video, please make sure to like this video, subscribe, and yeah, we'll be talking about this a bit more, probably in a future live stream in general. Also, please go to my music channel, which I'll leave the link in the description if you'd like to check out music. I do rock, punk rock, mainly alternative. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great rest of the day.